to Constitution headquarters. I've been studying for the past, I guess, 6-7 months, just trying to get everything figured out. Hold on one second here. Smoky. So we're gonna go in some great detail today about different stuff. And I think what I'm gonna do is, I was gonna go handheld, but I think instead what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put this in a clip here, and I'm gonna use this tripod and try to keep it so that, keep the camera from being too shaky. Give me 1 second here. Hopefully this works. Okay, hopefully this will work. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna do a full rundown on the exclusionary rule and the attenuation doctrine. Today, you're gonna learn some things that you did not know yesterday. That's an absolute fact. So let me kind of go over a couple things here. You know, right over here, you're gonna have your 7 articles of the Constitution. And then as we go down the line here, we have our 3 branches of government that are determined in Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution. So this is Congress, which is clearly defined in Article 1 of the Constitution. This is going to be your executive branch, which is going to be clearly defined in Article 2 of the Constitution. And then this is Article 3, which is the Supreme Court, or the court system in the U.S. Constitution. And that is going to come from those 7 articles in the beginning, where our founding fathers put a lot of stuff together. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of jump in. I want to show you something important here. Right along the top of this graphic, you're gonna see US presidents. You guys double tap on your screen real quick. Double tap on your screen. Double tap on your screen real fast. Let's get a few people in here. 11 likes, 50 people. Let's get a few more likes. So right along the top here, you have each president. Now, if you go down the line here, you'll see how we broke up the presidents. The way we broke them up was by this coloration. So now, the way that the board game Constitution headquarters works is each new president creates another number. So let me just make it easy for you guys so you guys can really understand exactly what I'm talking about here. If I go down the line here and we take a look at President Trump. So as you know, in my modeling, President Trump is listed as number 45, and then President Trump is listed again as number 47, and Biden would be number 46. But in my modeling, the way that I determined it wasn't that Trump is 47 and 45 and Biden is 46. Trump is 67, Biden is 68, and Trump is 69. And what that means specifically is that the presidency has turned over 69 times since the very beginning. Ironically, Trump is number 69 on turning over the presidency. So now you're gonna see a bunch of Supreme Court cases here, and this is our timeline. I'll be referring back up to this timeline pretty regularly as I teach you guys the exclusionary rule. And there's some stuff you're gonna have to learn, you're gonna have to know to really understand what I'm saying to you. So we have the presidents here. So along the top, we have all of the presidents, and there's been 69 different presidents that have come in and changed how the government was working. So, I mean, a lot of people, you don't have them memorized. If you can go Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, John Quincy Adams is going to lose to Andrew Jackson when he runs for re-election. And then Andrew Jackson is going to be re-elected again in 1833. Then Martin Van Buren is Andrew Jackson's successor. Then William Henry Harrison is president for like a month, and then he dies. And then after William Henry Harrison, John Tyler takes over and puts his own administration in effect, which is not the same as what William Harrison wanted. And so there was a big backlash against John Tyler. But then James Polk came in, and this guy did the most expansive, got the most property in the United States over any president. Thomas Jefferson is famous for the Louisiana Purchase. Well, let me tell you, James Polk did even more. He got more land than Thomas Jefferson by getting the Southwest and the West all together, and the Northwest as well. And then after Polk, you went Zachary Taylor, who's going to die in office, and Millard Fillmore is going to take over. Total piece of shit. Total piece of shit. Same thing with Franklin Pierce. Total garbage president. So was James Buchanan. And then after that, you have Abraham Lincoln's going to come in. And what a lot of people don't actually realize is that Abraham Lincoln, after the Civil War ends, and it's pretty much over when he's murdered in Ford Theater, he's reelected to the presidency. He's only president for just like a month or two. And then he's shot, and then Johnson takes over. And then Johnson, of course, cannot get reelected because Ulysses S. Grant comes in. He wins not one, but 2 terms. Then after that, Rutherford B. Hayes, the great steal. You think the election was stolen in 2020? You've never seen anything unless you know the history of Rutherford B. Hayes. This guy was given the election as long as he would end the occupation of Northern troops in the South. Then after that, James Garfield's going to come in. He's going to be extraordinarily popular, but he's going to get shot and killed in office. He's only president for a year and a half. Then Chester A. Arthur takes over, and this is the big battle between the half-pints and the stalwarts, half-breeds and stalwarts, and so that's what's happened there. Grover Cleveland comes in. This was the first original 2-term president with a break in between, because you had Grover Cleveland come in here, and then he loses the re-election when Benjamin Harrison beats him, and then Grover Cleveland wins re-election again in 1893. Before Trump, he was the only president who had a split presidency. Now, as we go down the line a little bit here, William McKinley. William McKinley is going to be a big one in this particular lesson that I'm going to teach today, because William McKinley had deep ties to Supreme Court Justice William R. Day. William R. Day, who's going to serve on the circuit court, he's going to be appointed by William R. McKinley. We're going to get back into that in a minute. But let's keep going down the line here because I don't want to lose track. I want to keep it as cool as I can here. So William McKinley is elected to presidency in 1897. He's reelected in 1901, but he gets shot and killed and dies 3 months after he's elected. That gives Teddy Roosevelt a chance to take the reins and be president. Now, after he's president, he wins re-election. And what he does is he takes William Howard Taft as Secretary of Navy or Secretary of the War, different names in different time periods, but Taft ends up being his real #1 guy. And then Teddy Roosevelt helps William Howard Taft get elected to the presidency in 1909, but he's a progressive and he's a secret closet conservative. So these two guys have a major falling out. You can read a book called Bully Pulpit. I'll be teaching some of that in this lesson. Now, when he runs for re-election, Teddy Roosevelt actually runs against him. They split the vote, and Woodrow Wilson gets into office, one of the worst presidents in U.S. history. One of the worst presidents, you can't even imagine. Woodrow Wilson is re-elected. He barely beats out Charles Evan Hughes. Charles Evan Hughes, who was on the Supreme Court. Oh, sorry about that. Charles Evan Hughes, who was on the Supreme Court at the time in 1916, but he actually quits the Supreme Court to run for president. Charles Evan Hughes was the former governor of New York, and so he really figured that he could win the presidency, and he almost did. He almost beat Woodrow Wilson, but Woodrow beat him there in the last second here. So then, as we continue to go down the line, after Woodrow Wilson, he has a stroke in his 3rd or 4th year in his 2nd term, and then he ends up really kind of just being a crippled, and he's a real travesty. He's a real bad president. Alien and Sedition Act, he's a real piece of shit in general. Then Warren Harding is elected, but Warren Harding, he's going to die in office, and Calvin Coolidge is going to take over. Calvin Coolidge is then elected to his 2nd term, and then after that, Herbert Hoover gets in. You should be able to name every U.S. president down the line. So after Herbert Hoover, you're going to get Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And this is what's going to cause the real rift in politics based on how many times you can be elected to the presidency. Because he's going to get elected not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is going to die in office just a month after being in office, after the end of World War II. World War II, of course, as you know, we dropped nuclear bombs on Japan, and Franklin Delano, he died, but Harry Truman is the guy who actually dropped the bombs on Japan to officially get the end of the war going. Then as you go down, Harry Truman's reelected, and then you get Dwight Eisenhower in there. If you think of the 50s, just think of Dwight Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower is the man in the 1950s. So Dwight Eisenhower is reelected twice to the presidency. Sorry about that. A little bit shaky because I'm holding up a tripod. Give me 1 second. Let me adjust this ever so slightly. There we go. Okay, now here's the crazy part. Like, a lot of people don't even know about Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was as popular as Trump. More popular. He was more popular than Obama. Richard Nixon, who is Dwight Eisenhower's vice president, not once, but Dwight Eisenhower's vice president twice. He then loses to this new Democrat coming in named John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy, there are rumors from the JFK papers that Lyndon Johnson had something to do with his assassination, but these are conspiracy theories that we can't rely on. Or we don't know who killed JFK. It's still a great big smoking gun. But Nixon was primed to be president. 1952, 1956, he's vice president. 1960, he comes in and wins the presidency. It's a total, I mean, for Nixon to lose the presidency, it's a total shit show. I mean, he cannot believe that John F. Kennedy comes in and beats him. But what this does for Nixon is unbelievable, because remember, he's the man. He is in government for 8 years from 1953 to 1961. So Nixon is super, super popular because Dwight Eisenhower, the things that this guy did, remember, he sent in the troops into Little Rock to make sure desegregation could happen. So now, as we go down the line here, John F. Kennedy wins, and then when he gets assassinated, Lyndon Johnson takes over as president. Then Lyndon Johnson wins re-election, snuffing out Richard Nixon. Because Richard Nixon's always running for president from 1952 all the way up. Now, here's the crazy part. This is a really interesting little ripple in history. So John F. Kennedy's president. Lyndon Johnson takes over after he gets assassinated. Then Lyndon Johnson's reelected. He takes Hubert Humphrey as his vice president. Then when you run for the election, 1969 here, Richard Nixon wins by a landslide. And here's the crazy part. Spiro Agnew is his vice president. But what happens is something very, very strange, because Richard Nixon is reelected to the presidency, but then during Richard Nixon's presidency, Spiro Agnew, who was reelected with Richard Nixon, Spiro Agnew has to resign because he's caught up in scams, and he's caught up in scams, so Spiro Agnew has to resign. So Richard Nixon then appoints Gerald Ford to the vice presidency. Richard Nixon then gets caught up in Watergate. He has to resign, and then Gerald Ford, who was never elected, becomes president of the United States. His vice president is now Nelson Rockefeller. Maybe you heard of that name before, John D. Rockefeller. This is one of his relatives. Jimmy Carter gets in, and he's really known as the first modern day progressive. And his vice president, Walter Mondale, he's gonna run for president, and Ronald Reagan is gonna beat him by a landslide. Now, the reason I put US versus Leon, this is where it creates the good faith exception for cops, where they can get evidence against you, but as long as they get the evidence is found in good faith, then it's added. And Ronald Reagan had a lot to do with that. People celebrate Reagan. To me, he was one of the worst presidents in US history. He was such a bad leader, you have no idea. But here's the thing, George H. Bush is his vice president, not once, but twice. Then George H. Bush gets elected to the presidency, and he has Dan Quayle as his running mate. Dan Quayle is vice president, but then Bill Clinton comes in, and he shellacks George H. Bush for the presidency in 1993. William Clinton is his vice president's Al Gore. He's reelected in 1996, 1997, and then he's president until 2001 when George W. Bush comes in. George W. Bush is going to take Dick Cheney as his running mate vice president, and George W. Bush is going to get reelected even after 9/11 in 2001, which is really kind of astounding because he should have been dumped. He was the guy that got us bombed on his watch. Such a piece of shit, you have no idea. So then Cheney's the vice president, but really Bush is in the back painting pictures, and Cheney's running the government. And what Cheney is doing specifically is setting up a war in Iraq so that he can put his company Halliburton in there to get multi-billion-dollar contracts. So then Barack Obama comes in, he wins, everybody votes for him, like, yay, the first black president, but then he drones to death 1 million people in the Middle East to go to wedding parties, and he uses a deck of cards and says, oh, this is the King of Spades. Oh, this is the Nine of Hearts. So he ends up where he loses a lot of clout as being a liberal because he also signs the National Defense Authorization Act that was originally created by George Bush after 9/11. So then as we go down the line, you had Biden, who's his vice president. Barack Obama's reelected, Biden is his vice president. Then Trump he doesn't win. He doesn't run for president in 2017. That would be Hillary Clinton, and Biden clearly just shellacks her. Trump clearly shellacks Hillary Clinton by 15 million votes. Mike Pence is his vice president. Then Biden ends up getting elected in between this, and now we have the Grover Cleveland situation. You see? So Trump is elected, then he loses re-election to Biden, then he's president again now, and here's the current J.D. Vance. So now, if you really want to understand history, remember this, Trump is called 45 and 47. 47, so he's the 45th president and the 47th president. But that's not how my modeling works. Let me show you how my modeling works, okay? Now take a good look here so that we really understand what we're talking about. If you see along the top, these are the US presidents. Now, how many US presidents have there actually been? Trump is called 45 and 47, but is that true? Absolutely not. It is not true. The presidency has switched over 69 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Now right here, a new president, 15. Do you see how that works? A lot of people don't consider every time you get a new president, you got to count that 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, all the way down the line till we get to Trump, and that is number 69. Okay, so now we have a basic understanding of how the presidencies have switched over from time to time. And now let's take a look at the bigger chart on the wall here, and let's understand US history in contextual format. So this is the prison industry starting back here. The Pennsylvania Quakers, before America was even a country, Pennsylvania had created what's called solitary confinement jails where criminals could take time to think about the crimes they had committed. Well, let me tell you something. There's absolutely no prison industry in America at all whatsoever until 1920. Let's take a look at what happens here. In 1920, the 18th Amendment passes, which creates prohibition in the United States of America. Okay, so what happens then? What happens is we create a prison industrial complex. We go from 40,000 people in prison to over 100,000 people. So we went from 40,000 to about 200,000 people, 5 times the ad from 1920 to 1933. Okay, cool. So now we understand this is where the prison industrial complex happens. So how does it really become where we get a prison graph like this? How does that happen? How do we get a prison graph that goes like that? Well, let's take a good look. Let's take a good look here. So here's how we get a prison graph that goes from where we have 200,000 people in prison at the end of Prohibition to where we have 1 million people in prison in 1980. How does that happen? Well, they got rid of the Fourth Amendment altogether. The Fourth Amendment, the right for you to be secure in your person, houses, papers, and effects, is completely ended. It is ended. They end the Fourth Amendment with the 1968 case of Terry versus Ohio right here. Right about there is Terry versus Ohio, and then the prison industry takes off like a rocket. So what is the Fourth Amendment? The Fourth Amendment is the right of the people to be secure in their person, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation of the victim who swears that you violated their rights, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. You guys do me a favor, double tap on the screen, double tap, hit the like button for me real quick. I'm gonna give you a full breakdown of the Fourth Amendment. I'm gonna teach you something today that you did not know yesterday. Double tap on the screen, let's get some likes in here. That likes the video for me, please. 2,000, 3,000 people in here. Double tap the screen for me, give me a few likes. Give me a few likes, help me. Thank you, I really appreciate it. Okay, so cool. So the very first step in getting rid of our Fourth Amendment right is gonna come, you're not gonna believe it. How do you think, let me ask you a question. Do you think that the Fourth Amendment being abolished is gonna happen in a way that is supposed to, intended to be good for us? That's exactly how it happens. That's exactly how it happens. And let me explain it in great detail. Let me light this bad chicken up. Okay. So now this is going to blow your mind, because the exclusionary rule is the 1914 case of Weeks versus United States. Weeks versus United States. In Weeks versus United States, you have to understand something important. Fremont Weeks, that's the name of him. Fremont Weeks had the perfect cover for an illegal gambling empire. He was working at the Union Station in Kansas City, Missouri for an express company that gave him direct access to the US mail system. By day, he processed legitimate packages and mailed shipments, but by night, Fremont Weeks was running a sophisticated lottery ticket operation using the railroad and his direct access to the mail. Well, on 1911, cops showed up at the train station where Fremont Weeks worked. And then when they took him into custody, he was sitting there wondering how he got caught. What the cops did, the federal agents who were trying to bust the lottery ticket scam that Fremont Weeks was running, they went to his house and they searched his house illegally without a warrant. The officers ransacked his bedroom, seized personal letters, business correspondence, documents detailing the extensive gambling network that Fremont Weeks had created using his connections with the railroad and mailing lottery tickets across state lines illegally. What he would do is he would put lottery tickets on a train leaving Kansas City, Missouri. They would go to another port, and then more criminals would grab those lottery tickets. So then after that, they went to his house and they searched it. But that's not the worst part. Then federal agents went back to his house and searched his house again. And this is going to be the beginning of the exclusionary rule. But what you have to understand is that Fremont Weeks was a criminal. Fremont Weeks was guilty of running a scam lottery tickets across state lines. And this is the most fundamental of our Fourth Amendment right. You have the right to be secure in your person, houses, papers, and effects. Your houses. And his house was searched after the federal agents came to his work and arrested him without a warrant. Weeks may have been a federal... He was committing a federal crime, exploiting the Postal Service for his gambling scheme, but the government's blatant disregard for his constitutional rights would accidentally create the foundation for the exclusionary rule. And what is the exclusionary rule? Well, this is really important. If you really want to understand history and you want to understand how it works, you have to understand that this is the most important part right here. If you don't know this part right here, it's going to be really, really hard to teach you as we move forward when we go into the attenuation doctrine. I want you to think about evidence as fruit. Okay? If the cops search you and they find evidence, it's fruit. If the cops come to your house and they find your wife with a black eye, then that's going to be fruit, the evidence. Evidence is fruit, okay? This is a very important part of understanding the exclusionary rule. The exclusionary rule is going to be very, very specific. It's going to say that you can't use the fruit of the search. The fruit of the search is the evidence. Remember this. The knowledge of the search is the tree of knowledge. These are two different things. You're going to have to understand this if you're going to understand the exclusionary rule. Okay, cool. Okay, so the exclusionary rule is determined. And let me tell you something. We know for a fact that Fremont Weeks is a criminal. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. But what do the courts say? What do the justices say? So remember, William Day is going to be an attorney in Canton, Ohio. William Day is an attorney in Canton, Ohio for 25 years. He's a very successful criminal attorney and property attorney in Canton, Ohio. It just so happens the reason why he got put on the Circuit Court of Appeals out of Ohio, remember everything happens out of Ohio is corrupt. William Day, who's best friends with this guy, William McKinley. William Day helps William McKinley run for president and win, not once, but twice. So then, William Day, now, what do we know? What do we know for a fact? We know that Fremont Weeks was a criminal running a criminal enterprise. And so when William Day writes his opinion, he writes the opinion because they searched Weeks' house illegally. So William Day establishes the exclusionary rule, and he says federal courts cannot, as against seasonable application for their return in a criminal prosecution, retained for the purposes of evidence against the accused. They cannot use his letters or correspondence seized in his home during the absence of a search without a warrant. These guys, all of them, stand up, all these guys right here, these guys all stand up for weeks and they all write this opinion that's all based on William Day's majority, unanimous opinion that we have to exclude any fruit. We have to exclude any fruit. If there's any fruit that is created, we have to exclude it if it's done without a warrant. And they're going to write all these amazing holdings explaining that you cannot have fruit of the poisonous tree. Now, you cannot have fruit. You cannot get fruit. Okay, now here's something crazy that happens. In the 1920 case of Silverthorne Lumber Company versus United States, in this case right here, what this case is going to do, Silverthorne Lumber Company, this case is going to determine that there are two factors. Silverthorne Lumber Company is going to determine that there is fruit, the evidence of the search, but then there's the tree of knowledge. You have to have knowledge before you get to the fruit. Silverthorne Lumber Company, let me give you the story of Silverthorne Lumber Company so you can kind of understand it, so you can kind of put it in perspective. And this case right here, this is going to create that entire, let me try to lower my tripod down a little bit here. Okay, there you go. So Silverthorne Lumber Company is going to create the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. We know that if you get evidence, that's the fruit. Well, in Silverthorne Lumber Company, Frederick Silverthorne and his father were running a tax evasion scheme through their lumber company, deliberately hiding income and cheating on their taxes. The Silverthornes were not innocent small business owners. They were literally evading taxes, and the IRS wanted to get them. So on February 1917, what happened was federal agents went and arrested the Silverthornes, and then while they were in jail, they raided their house. They grabbed evidence of tax fraud. They grabbed envelopes. They grabbed any business records that the Silverthornes had. The feds went and grabbed after they arrested them and had them in jail in 1920. So then when they go to court, they get convicted for tax evasion because the records are clear. They are evading taxes. They are evading taxes. Okay, so when they're evading taxes and then they get charged and they get convicted of tax evasion, then this guy right here, let me see if I can find him. Where is he? Where's Oliver Wendell Holmes? Silverthorne Lumber Company. Then this guy right, I don't see Oliver on here. I'm looking for him. Okay, it doesn't matter. So then Oliver Wendell Holmes is going to write an opinion in Silverthorne Lumber Company, and he is going to uphold. Now remember, the Silverthorne Lumber Company, Frederick Silverthorne and his son were clearly cheating on their taxes. They were clearly doing it illegally. So then after the government arrested them, they could prosecute them. And remember, we broke it up. You have evidence, which is fruit. The evidence is the fruit, but the knowledge the government got from the tree of knowledge that they were evading their taxes, the fruit became poisoned because they got the fruit from knowledge that was poisoned. Fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine is created in the 1920 case of Silverthorne Lumber Company versus United States. You've heard of fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, but did you know that this is how Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote his holding? That there is fruit evidence, and then there is the tree of knowledge, where you can get the knowledge to prosecute them and get the evidence. This is insanely important that you understand this, or you will not understand. It's exactly how it works, dude. Get the fuck out of here. That's exactly how it works. That's exactly how it works. So now this is really important because over that time period of Silverthorne Lumber Company, these three justices here, Charles Evan Hughes, Joseph Lamar, and Horace Lurton, they vote in affirmative in the Weeks case that evidence that is got illegally without a warrant should be excluded. These three justices voted that way in 1914, Weeks versus United States. Now, in 1920, In 1920, in the Silverthorne Lumber Company case, those three justices are replaced by John Clark, Louis Brandeis, and James C. McReynolds. These three guys who are different ideologically from these three guys, in Silverthorne Lumber Company, they uphold the idea that you cannot get fruit from the tree of knowledge without a warrant, or the government cannot obtain that evidence illegally. Do you understand? Okay. Okie dokie. Oopa. Sorry about that. Let me know when you build out a graphic like this, my friend. I'll be happy to watch your presentation. But until then, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? I don't think you know shit. I'm just saying. Okay, so the entire idea, the entire basis of what Holmes wrote in his opinion was that there's two different aspects. There's the fruit, which is the evidence, but then there's the tree of knowledge that gets you to the evidence. In Silverthorne Lumber Company, what the Supreme Court said is you cannot get fruit from a tree that is poisonous. And that is the entire basis, the entire creation. Damn this damn thing. You cannot get that, and that's what he writes in this holding. Now, the idea that you're getting fruit of the poisonous tree in the Silverthorne Lumber Company case is going to be expanded. And the exclusionary rule is going to expand in the 1939 case of Nardone versus United States. Now, Nardone versus United States is an interesting little case because here's what happens. Remember, we had the prison industrial complex created by creating prohibition with the 18th Amendment and then getting it reversed in 1933 with the 21st Amendment, so alcohol became legal. But as you know, our government, what they do is they favor the rich and the privileged. So you could only get a liquor license. Very few people could get liquor licenses. Let me give you a little bit of the background on Nardone so you understand it. Frank Nardone was living large after Prohibition and orchestrating a massive smuggling operation that would have made other bootleggers jealous. His criminal empire involved multiple vessels, including a British oil screw, a ship called the Isabel H, carrying 2,400 cases of premium alcohol from St. Pierre on the SS Southern Sword. So they had a big ship operation outside the coast in the harbor of New York. Now, Nardone and his partner, Levick, operated like maritime criminal masterminds, conducting business meetings at upscale Manhattan locations like the Hotel Astor and Belford Restaurant, where they made dozens of phone calls. Remember this part. Nardone made dozens of phone calls coordinating their smuggling fleet. What Nardone didn't know is that federal agents were listening to every word they were saying. They had illegally wiretapped Nardone's phones in direct violation of the Federal Communications Act of 1934. I'm sorry, I don't have it on the board. And so after they violate that, then he gets arrested. Now remember, Nardone is guilty. Nardone is guilty of smuggling alcohol and selling alcohol illegally to all the bodegas in New York. Nardone is guilty as all guilty can be. But let me read you some of the holding. Nardone is guilty as hell running alcohol, but that doesn't really matter. That doesn't really matter to the justices, because the justices are going to write, in a prosecution in federal court, evidence produced by wiretapping is in violation of the 1934 Federal Communications Act, and if you intercept their conversations, the evidence procured through it is the knowledge you got by listening in on their phone calls, and therefore it is unconstitutional, and they reject Nardone's guilty plea and find him not guilty, and Nardone is set free based on the exclusionary rule and fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. This is really important that you understand this part, because if you don't understand this, if you don't understand if you don't understand that there is fruit, there is evidence, and then there's the tree of knowledge, and these are two different things, then you're not going to understand the next part, because the next part is how the government completely screwed us. Remember what Oliver Wendell Holmes is going to write in his holding. Oliver Wendell Holmes is going to write that you cannot use the knowledge that created the fruit. You cannot use the tree of knowledge to convict somebody of a crime because you wouldn't have that knowledge if you didn't wrongfully raid their home. Okay, so this is important. And his entire analogy of there is the fruit of the evidence and then there's the tree of knowledge of the evidence. His entire analogy, his entire allegory is turned upside down. Turned upside down. And the way that happens is in the 1963 case of Wong Sun versus United States. And let me give you specifics of what this says, because this is absolutely infuriating. Because Oliver Wendell Holmes had written that holding to try to protect people from the government overreaching. And that doesn't happen, because the reason it doesn't happen is because of the Warren Court. Now we kind of have to do a little jump step hip hop here. So, Mapp versus Ohio in 1961, you probably have heard of this as being fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. But the truth is, fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine was created in the 1920 case of Silverthorne Lumber Company versus United States. So what did Mapp exactly do that Silverthorne didn't do? What Mapp did is it created the incorporation of the Fourth Amendment into every single different state. So before 1961, there was no such thing as fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine in Ohio because that was only a federal Fourth Amendment right. You didn't have the Fourth Amendment right in the states as well. But Mapp versus Ohio, that changed everything, and that was led by the Warren Court. And so when Warren upheld fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine and then incorporated it into the states' rights, man, I'll tell you what, the cops hated him. Literally, I shit you not. Cops hated Earl Warren for incorporating Mapp versus Ohio into states, not just into federal law. And so this is where you very first get fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine being applied to states. Okay, now here's a really important thing. The cops are picketing Earl Warren. The big one that Earl Warren had done was the 1954 case of Brown versus Board of Education, where he desegregated America. America did not desegregate in 1954. A lot of people believe that we desegregated, but we did not at all whatsoever. As a matter of fact, we're not going to officially desegregate until the 1969 case, of Green versus New Kent School Board. Green versus City School Board of New Kent County. In 1968, Hugo Black made an announcement and he said that you have to desegregate now, but we did not desegregate. So this is really important. The cops hated Earl Warren, wanted to have him impeached because he had passed Brown versus Board of Education and desegregated America. And then the cops hated Earl Warren specifically. I'm telling you this, the truth. The cops hated Earl Warren because he did Mapp versus Ohio, which created fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine into every different state in America. The cops couldn't just raid someone's house. Hey, moderators, go ahead and kick the trolls off. Just bounce them. I gotta focus on what I'm doing here. Just get rid of this asshole. I'm just done with him. Appreciate it. So now here it is. So your Mapp versus Ohio is incorporated to the states, and so Earl Warren has got to give the cops a bone. So what does he do? In 1963, Earl Warren creates the Attenuation Doctrine using the words that Oliver Wendell Holmes had written to create fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, and he used Oliver Wendell Holmes' words against us, completely and utterly against us. Wong Sun. Now, it's important that you know a little bit of background of Wong Sun versus United States before we go too much further. There was a guy named James Toy. James Toy was running a heroin distribution operation out of his laundry business in San Francisco in Chinatown. That's who Wong Sun was working with. Wong Sun was working with James Toy. And so after 6 weeks using surveillance and informants, the feds finally caught up to James Toy. And they grabbed James Toy and they bought drugs from him out of what was called the Blackie Toy, who opted out of a laundromat. When 6 or 7 federal narcotics agents raided Toy's laundromat based on the confidential informant's information, Toy knew exactly why they were there and tried to flee through his apartment because he was guilty of selling heroin. The agents chased the drug dealer through his own business and arrested him without a warrant and under pressure. Now remember, James Toy is wrongfully arrested. He's arrested illegally, without probable cause, without a warrant. But remember, Earl Warren is beholden to the police because they're picketing him saying, impeach Earl Warren. He would only be the second Supreme Court justice impeached. The first one was Salmon. And so then as you go down the line here, they go to James Toy and they say, hey, you need to give us some names so that we can get you off this. So he gives them the name of Wong's son, one of the guys who's working with him in San Francisco. The agents then raided Wong's son's home without a warrant, but didn't find any drugs there. They arrested him as part of a drug conspiracy. Days later, after being released on his own recognizance, Wong's son voluntarily returned to the police station and confessed to his role in a heroin distribution network. This act of confessing would become the legal foundation for the attenuation doctrine. And let me explain what the attenuation doctrine is so that you really understand how we go from fruit of the poisonous tree to the attenuation doctrine. I'm gonna lower this down a little bit more so you guys can see it. Okay. So what the attenuation doctrine says is that there is fruit of the evidence. Remember, the evidence is the fruit, and then the knowledge is from the tree of knowledge, where you get the knowledge to run in the Silverthorne Lumber Company because they got the knowledge of tax evasion from an illegal search, to run in Fremont Weeks from Weeks versus United States. And so what the Warren Court does is it uses this analogy. It uses the analogy that you have the tree of knowledge and the fruit of the tree of knowledge, which is the evidence. And they say if enough things have happened between the knowledge and the fruit, it's attenuated. If enough things happen in here where you can get the fruit, but enough things have happened, like Wong's son going back in a week later and confessing to being a heroin dealer, then the fruit of the search, in other words, in this particular case, it would be the confession that Wong's son made, okay? So Wong's son confesses they can use that fruit because it had been a week since they illegally arrested him, and so the taint of the unconstitutional arrest is then attenuated. And that's how you get the attenuation doctrine, where the cops can just arrest you and use the fruit of the evidence against you. I got this tripod, but it's not the best. So everything is turned upside down and on its head. Oh, come on now. I'm gonna have to pull this thing out of here real quick. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I just had to take it off the tripod, so it'll be a little bit shaky, but I had to get it off the tripod. Hey, thanks for the super chat. Thanks for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Okay. So now the attenuation doctrine creates the idea that if there's a break in the chain of custody of evidence, or if there's enough time has passed, and so this attenuation doctrine is going to completely and utterly wipe out the exclusionary rule. Because now cops can use evidence against you. Remember, the evidence that they seize, the evidence that they get against you, even if it's caught unconstitutionally, can be attenuated if enough things have passed between the knowledge and the fruit. These two little steps right here. Now, let me give you an example how the attenuation, remember, the exclusionary rule says any evidence that you got in violation of the Fourth Amendment cannot be used. It can't be used. This is what the exclusionary rule says. I read you part of the holding from Weeks. I read you part of the holding from Silverthorne Lumber Company. I read you part of the holding from Nardone. It was very clear. These justices back in the day all got together and said, no, you cannot use evidence that is obtained illegally. It's excluded. It's the exclusionary rule, or it's fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, where the knowledge you got to get the fruit was gotten illegally, so you can't use the fruit. This is the essence of the exclusionary rule. Okay. So remember, it just has to be attenuated. There has to be a break in the chain. So now how does that affect us? How does the attenuation doctrine affect us today? Because of the evidence to get the fruit can't be used. The attenuation doctrine is going to take center stage. In the 1978 case of U.S. versus Cicciolini, Cicciolini is a florist, and once again, it has to do with gambling tickets. He's running lottery tickets and gambling tickets out of his flower shop in New York. So someone tips off the feds that Cicciolini is running a gambling operation out of his flower shop, and I believe it's in 1975. The case hits the Supreme Court in 1978. But in Cicciolini, what happens is a cop goes into Cicciolini's flower shop and then starts just looking around through the drawers. Nobody's in the flower shop. It's like an empty front desk. The cop searches Cicciolini's desk and he finds lottery tickets inside of an envelope, and he's accused of interstate gambling, which is illegal in 1978. So then Cicciolini, he comes in, the cop leaves, doesn't take the evidence. The cop then goes, this is the most ironic thing. The cop then leaves, one cop goes to the other cop and says, hey, I found illegal gambling tickets in Cicciolini's shop. So this cop says, okay, let me go over there. So the cop who found the gambling tickets by illegally searching through Cicciolini's drawers, he tells another federal agent. This federal agent then goes over to Cicciolini's shop, and what does he do? He follows an employee out who's leaving. And then the new cop questions Cicciolini's employee and says, hey, is Cicciolini running an illegal gambling operation out of his flower shop? Well, Cicciolini's employee completely and utterly confesses that Cicciolini is running an illegal gambling operation out of his flower shop. It goes to the Supreme Court because Cicciolini appeals and said, wait a minute. You remember, you guys had established that the only reason you got the fruit of the illegal gambling tickets is because the original cop came in and he got the knowledge that I was running an illegal gambling operation. The knowledge that he got and the fruit that he saw was based on knowledge, the tree of knowledge, which is fruit of the poisonous tree. You can't try me and convict me based on fruit you got from a poisonous tree, because the first federal agent had no right to come into my shop and search my shop and look for gambling tickets. Okay, so what happens? It goes to the Supreme Court, and they tell Cicciolini, actually, the reason why we can use the fruit of the poisonous tree is because it's been attenuated. The original cop who searched your house, the original cop who searched your flower shop, he didn't keep the evidence and he didn't arrest you. Instead, he told another cop, and then this cop questioned one of your employees, and this cop, he got the confession from your employee without coercing the employee. The employee simply gave up the information. And so that means that the fruit of the confession from the employee has been attenuated, the chain has been broken, so the taint of the unconstitutional stop, the unconstitutional search, the fruit of the poisonous tree is no longer poisoned because it was attenuated. And this is the basis of the beginning of the end for us. And I think that maybe you guys can feel it, but you can feel that we've lost all of our rights. We have lost all of our rights because of the attenuation doctrine. So what this means is that the cops want to get evidence against you, they can simply go collect the evidence illegally, then go to another cop and say, hey, I found illegal stuff. Can you go ask some questions? And that other cop can go, and then it's been attenuated. It's so unbelievably preposterous. So unbelievably preposterous. And when you diminish the Fourth Amendment to be secure in your person, houses, papers, and effects, and this is the Fourth Amendment right here, you have a right to be secure in your person, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. When that happens, then you get a prison industry that goes like this. I mean, really take a look. Really take a look at this prison industry. Really take a look here. I mean, this is some sick shit. And it happens when we get rid of the Fourth Amendment. Here's the Fourth Amendment here. As soon as we diminish the Fourth Amendment with what? The attenuation doctrine and Terry versus Ohio, then look what happens to prison. If you have no security in your person, houses, papers, and effects, then you end up just like this. Just like this. Anyway, okay. Okay, so hopefully you learned a little something today about what the exclusionary rule is and is not, how the attenuation doctrine, all they have to do is pass on the evidence. All they have to do is pass on the evidence that they got from somebody else to a new cop, and then it's attenuated. And then the attenuation doctrine ends up going all the way to the 2016 case of Utah versus Streif. So Streif is arrested in Utah, obviously, and he gets pulled over and they find a warrant, but the stop is unconstitutional. They're checking out a trap house, and Streif is coming in and out of the trap house. And so then when Streif leaves the trap house and gets in his car and drives away, they pull him over unconstitutionally. Now, what the police say, what the courts say, is that, yeah, when we pulled over Streif, we found drugs in his car, so we have the fruit from the unconstitutional pullover. So the knowledge that they got that it was a trap house is one thing. But then when they pulled him over unconstitutionally, they got fruit, evidence that there was indeed a drug house going on. The cops pull him over and arrest him. Now the Supreme Court says that it's attenuated. The unconstitutional stop is attenuated because they found a warrant for his arrest. It's so unbelievable. It's so unbelievable. I'm going to give you guys a full breakdown on all these Supreme Court justices because I studied the biography of every single Supreme Court justice when I was in the dungeon. It's a sick, disgusting cesspool. It's a sick, disgusting cesspool. There we go. Hopefully this bad chicken will stay like here, but it's not doing a very good job. I can tell you that right now. It's a bummer. Come on, baby. Stay right there. Let me lower this bad chicken down, see if I can get it to stay like this. This little tripod holder here is not good. There we go. Okie dokie. Okay, cool. And now I'll answer any questions. I'll answer any questions that you guys have regarding the exclusionary rule or the attenuation doctrine, if anybody has any questions. And then after this, I'm gonna end this live stream and I'm gonna go live from OBS because I have a couple cop videos I wanna go over today. Hopefully you guys learned something today. Team DLZ, put it in the chat, Team DLZ. Hit the like button, everybody double tap on the screen. Let's get to 1,000 likes. We got 800 people here, 757 likes. Let's get to 1,000 likes real quick. Everybody just double tap on the screen if you would, please. Put Team DLZ in the chat if you learned something today. I appreciate it. Good to see everybody. Chad Senior is in here. What's going on? Mikey B, good to see you, my friend. I got your questions. What do I do in Georgia at a traffic stop? I'm usually the passenger. You get the Fifth Amendment cop cards on DeleteLawz.com, and you use that yellow passenger card when you get pulled over in Georgia or any other state in America. Cool, good to see everybody. Almost to 1,000, 840 likes. Double tap on the screen. Let's get to 1,000 likes. 781 likes. That's not enough. Let's get a few more likes. Get a few more likes. Yeah, Jack, JAC, they have you every which way that's possible. I need to do this in a recording and really take my time with it, but I've been putting this together for months and months, and I keep saying I'm gonna show you guys some stuff, so I just wanted to show you guys some stuff today, but the truth is that I really need to do a recorded version of this. I believe in due process, so I'm not gonna align with most of the crowd who's like, they're illegal, just get rid of them. I think that there should be due process of law according to the U.S. Constitution. I mean, I'm down with due process. So there it is right there. Oh, I can get into the different forms of social contracts, you know, between volunteerism and anarchism, aristocracy, Republican, which is the system we lived in, the social contract is a Republican form of government, and then you have a monarch, and then you have a dictatorship. So there's several different kinds of government that you can get into. Yeah, that's the whole thing. So Fresh Toast said, question, how long is the exclusionary rule, attenuation rule valid for? Is it weeks, months, or years? In some cases, it is being pulled over illegally, then they find a warrant, and so the taint of the illegal stop is cleansed, is attenuated. So it can be a few minutes, or it can be days, weeks, months. It all depends on how the court wants to get you. And that's the whole goal of the court, is to try to arrest you. That's the whole court. Okay, cool. I'm actually gonna end this live. I'll be live again in about 5 minutes. Join me in about 5 minutes. I'm gonna start another live stream. We're gonna go over a few videos. I gotta call somebody in Ironton, Ohio, where they were arrested for words, for free speech. So I gotta jump, but I will be live again in about 5 minutes. Stick with me, I'll be back in 5 minutes. Thanks for watching my introduction to Constitution Headquarters. I'll see you guys on the next one. Later, Gators.